let's take the next caller, and then we'll come on to the next bit. So we will talk to let's talk to Prasad in India, who wants to discuss charity and religion, which is what Ben wanted to talk about. Prasad, what do you have?
Hi, Ben. Hello, Katy.
Hi.
Okay, let's talk charity and religion. So my take is that I think charity is a good thing, and if it works, then how does it matter if religion does it or if how does it matter? Like anyone can do it. So if religion does it, I think that's good as well.
So my question, like, because I agree with you there, that if a religious group is doing a charity, and if that's all that they're doing, I would agree that that'd be fine. My particular question was about if they're only doing the charity so that they can force you to listen to their message, like a Christian group that goes to another country and says, I'm going to give you healthcare, but you have to listen to me talk about the Bible, or we're not going to give you healthcare. That's what we're talking about. It's the people who their underlying motive is to convert you, and then the charity is just, well, we'll do this so we look like we're not just coming in to convert you. But I do agree that if there was a religious organization, which there are some that do this, where like if I had to choose between two different organizations, and one was atheist, and I don't know if they were doing
Rubbish.
something like, if they were being very mean, angry atheists that were trying to make everyone eat babies or something against their will, or I had a Christian group that was like, they were Christian, but they never tried to convince anybody of their views. Like they didn't make it an evangelical mission. They just said, hey, I'm gonna go build homeless shelters, and that's it. We're just gonna do it for the sake of doing something good. I would happily volunteer with that Christian group because they don't seem to have any ulterior motives. They're just doing something good. So in that case, I agree that the religious group in that sense would probably be the one to go with.
Yep.
But it's that little caveat there of what is their motive.
Yeah, so I get that. So let's split in two pieces, the charity. One would be just charity and one would be some ulterior motive. So shouldn't handling the ulterior motive be job of the one who receives the charity? Because if someone's getting fed, then they're getting fed. If someone's getting a meal, then they're getting a meal. So shouldn't it be their job to think like what's good or what's not? So if someone's, maybe their ulterior motive is to spread religion, let's assume that. So now shouldn't, okay, and they're trying to spread religion because they think it's good. Now, let's imagine if I get something. Shouldn't it be my job to think if what I get is actually good or not? Not just good for me, but for people around me as well. Not just people around me, like for everyone whosoever may impact me. My goal is to maximize my joy and my comfort. I think that's everyone's goal. So
I mean, so
let's imagine
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think I know the point you're making is like it's your personal responsibility. Like because I've when I was a teenager, there was some Bible thing that was giving out free food, and I used to go to it, and the condition was you could come and have this free nice hot cooked dinner as long as you listen to someone talk about the Bible for half an hour. And for me that was a fair trade, because at that point I was an atheist, some of my friends were Christians and were going. I just ignored it all. I took personal responsibility of these things. And I think when you think about it to yourself, you think, oh well, shouldn't just everyone just do that? Like, can't you just make up your own mind? And I think that's a good ideal way of looking at the world. But I think the reality is that lots of people do get suckered by stuff. And I think maybe a good comparison is for things like scams. I mean, there are lots of scams going on at the moment, especially like in the world of cryptocurrency and stuff, because there's not much regulation, and there are, tried and tested scams which are thousands of years old, and people are making millions of monies, millions of dollars, pounds, whatever, from scamming people. And you could say, well, I would never fall for that. I know these things are scams. I know what a Ponzi scheme looks like. So really, shouldn't it be the person's responsibility if they're going to invest in one of these things? But the issue is,
both parts.
we could say that, but we know that people get their lives ruined over this. And we know people are stupid. We know people believe these charismatic scammers. And it's the same with religion. And I want everyone to just have the freedom to do whatever. But if we have huge numbers of people ruining their lives and going bankrupt over a scam, then that's sad for me, because it's ruining other people's lives, and I don't like seeing people having their lives ruined. But also, it's a structural problem that affects society and could come back to affect me, because if I say, oh, well, whatever, they've had their lives ruined, who cares? Then suddenly there might be hundreds or thousands of like homeless people suddenly on the streets because of this one scam that maybe if we had a regulation would have prevented it. And it's the same maybe with these religious motivations. I know that these indoctrination like exchanges for food or for clothes or whatever, they work. And the religions know they work, and that's why they do them. And that means people get won over to these religions. And that isn't necessarily, bad. And I'm not saying all religious people are bad or anything, but it then does bring in, support for these religions. It gives them more political lobbying power, often brings in more money for them. It teaches people to believe authority who's handing them food over making their own mind up in a critical thinking way. And they're the issues I have with it. Do you agree with those?
Yep, partially. Actually, English is not my primary language, so I might have missed a few things, but I got two main points. So one is that isn't it responsibility of both the parties? Yes, it is. But if one party is irresponsible, then you can't, like, it doesn't remove the burden of like trying to understand stuff from the other party as well. So if one is being maybe apparently malicious, then the second party has to think as well. So one was that,
right?
And the second thing was that I don't remember it. There were two things.
Well, that's okay. Well, on the point you just made about both people's responsibilities, I do kind of agree that, especially when we talk about scammers, the people getting scammed is, partially their responsibility to some degree, but is mainly the scammer's responsibility, and that's true. And in that case, it's both people's responsibility. In that case, someone is being malicious, and it's easy to say, oh, well, they're bad, this is their problem. But in the case of some religions, people believe it's good when sometimes it is bad. And an example of that.
They think that.
Sorry, go on.
And they think that they are doing good. So, like, they aren't being malicious. They think that they are being good.
Yeah. And they don't always know. And that's why sometimes you could say, oh, well, it's these people's responsibility. Well,
and
I think we could.
Works. But religion is just a model.
Yeah.
And maybe there are parts of religion which are correct and which we have missed. Just could be a case.
Yeah, I think that with moral stuff, I think that's the good example in this, is when you discuss the morals of it, because someone might genuinely believe they're doing the loving thing to force their child through conversion therapy, for example. And if that's the case,
they're trying to do their best. That's the best they've got. They're trying to do their best.
The issue is
that's the best they've got.
Yeah, Yeah, it is, but these people, they're not doing this out of hate. Some people do that out of hate, and some people do it out of love. And I can say it's not a loving thing to do. That's true, but it causes suffering, and that's kind of where it's like difficult when we know something is bad, but the person doing it believes it's good. They have good intentions, but they're causing harm. Then I
Yep,
just think that's
what
different
you are
to causing
convinced
harm
of.
intentionally. Sorry?
That's what you are convinced of. That's what you think, that this is actually bad. Now, I'm not sure.
Well, but this is
that's
why
actually
though.
bad. Okay.
Well, but this is why we have these conversations on this show, and why we emphasize evidence, because with things like conversion therapy, we have evidence that it is bad. We have evidence that taking away healthcare from trans people is bad. We have evidence that treating people like unequals is does damage. So, like, yeah, it might be the best that somebody has at that time, but that's why this institution needs to be pushed back against, because we have the data that suggests what is true and what isn't. So yeah, I mean, they are models, and there might be some truth to any of these models, but we have evidence to back up why those things are good or why those things aren't. So that's kind of where we're coming from here.
Yep, we got bits and pieces of what's good and what's not. All we can do is make our best bet. So I'm not very well aware of what conversion therapy is, but let's imagine if I'll assume that it's trying to convince you of something other than what you think that to be the case. Like, if I think I feel hot, then saying that I don't feel hot wouldn't help me much. But that's a start. So I'm not saying that it could be a good thing. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying that being like stubbornly against something wouldn't really help. Because let's imagine if there are 10 things and one is good. I think we should keep that one thing. Like, you can't say that all of those 10, 20, 15, let's imagine 99% of ideas were garbage. But if 1% is good, keep that 1%, discard rest of 99%.
I agree.
I agree. I think that this is, I kind of mentioned this with the last caller, is I try and look at ideas and principles on their own and on their own merits. And sometimes it's very hard to separate them out. But if there's something in the Bible that's really good, I'm not going to say, well, I'm not going to do this because I don't believe in Christianity. I'm going to say, let's accept this on its own and evaluate it on its own. And if it's good, yeah, like you say, 1% of ideas maybe are good, and that's cool. Wherever they come from, whoever's saying them, I'm ready to evaluate them. And I do my best not to just dismiss things because of where they've come from or who said them. Obviously, there's some pattern matching going on there, and then we could do that another call for that. But I think, I think we're agreeing.
I think so too. I think we agree more than we disagree, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we circle back to charity? So I think that like educating people would be better than trying to like saying that charity is bad if they're bad intent.
So education is a brilliant example of where this gets difficult. If you're feeding people who are starving and you're giving them a sermon, I mean, it's hard for me to say you shouldn't do that because food, they need to live. Education can easily be indoctrination. And if you're turning up and creating schools in a place that didn't have schools, and then all you do is you teach your religion, and maybe you teach them maths and stuff, but what you're doing is like the main goal often for many of these places is to create more followers of their religion rather than to teach people maths. And I think not only can we end up in a situation where a religion is indoctrinating a population, but it can, and getting more followers, which I think is innately bad on its own, but they will end up inevitably teaching bad things. They will avoid teaching critical thinking. They'll avoid teaching questioning authority, and that kind of thing, which I think is an essential part of teaching someone to be a well-rounded person. I think that's where you can run into an issue. I think education is probably the best example of that.
So rather than teaching, I'd call it passing it on. Because people make mistakes, they get swayed. That's okay. Like, no one's perfect. People get swayed. That's okay. But the thing is, by education, I meant helping them exercise their brain. They'll bounce back. Like, if they can think critically, then they will bounce back. If they can't, then sorry for that. Like, I'm sorry for myself as well in that case, if I couldn't. But I'll try my best to bounce back. Shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think that
like,
it's just a reality that some people aren't good at critical thinking. And I think it'd be okay. It's kind of okay in one sense, just be like, oh, well, that's their problem. But in another sense, like, I want them to have a good life, and also I don't want them to become a problem for me. So that's why I'm invested in other people's critical thinking abilities.
Yeah. Yep. I would want people around me to be smarter than me. Yeah, that would be brilliant.
Cursed to be the most intelligent in the room. But yeah, I think this is it's been a good call, but perhaps we might move on to our last caller so we can fit him in the end of the show. But thanks, Prasad. That was a really good call. Yeah, and it's a good discussion. I think there's a lot of moral grey areas in charity in general. Maybe the only reason you need charity is if the state has failed to provide for the people. Who knows?